So we had a beautiful day in Ibaraki for this one. It was around 10 degrees Celsius, beautiful skies, sunny. Starting the front row again today, but this time we were sharing with the under 17 group. They were scored separately from us, but I think there were about 4 riders who got the middle of the starting line. The under 17 guys just jumped off the line there. They're in single digits, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the ME4 riders were starting with number 21. So the next two guys are ME4. There were a couple of technical sections early on that I thought might cause a bottleneck, so I didn't want to fall too far behind off the start. Just after this ridge here, there's one that's a tight little kind of steep turn here. It wasn't difficult, just a little slow. Then up to the right here, you see the under 17 guy fell. But this one was okay to ride in the pre-ride when no one was around. But in the middle of a race, it got tricky. Usually the best choice was just to get off and run. And with such a tight turn there, there's always a likely bottleneck. So overall, this was a really fast course, much faster than most courses I've ridden this year. There were a lot of sections like this here with a packed dirt, worn-in track that got very fast. And then a lot of the turns weren't really that technical or tight, so you could really maintain a lot of speed through them. With the faster speeds, that made it harder to find good places to pass, other than the wider straightaways. So in a place like this, you see number 37 on the right take a little more aggressive line there and cut off the guy in front of me. I think people learned and didn't do that as much in later laps, but it was just sort of a feature of this fast course. I had a little bit of a friendly rivalry this season with number 21 in front of me. I think we've been in almost all of the same races this season. In the last few weeks, we've been trading the top spot in the rankings. So we've both done fairly well, but not well enough to take a top 3 spot and move up to the next category. So I think we were both looking maybe to do that today. So it's still just a couple minutes in, but aside from those under 17 guys who just jumped off the front, there wasn't really anyone in the ME4 category that was any farther ahead. So I thought there was a chance that this group of 6 riders or so, and maybe there were a couple of people behind me, but that we might stick together for a while. So I figured I'd just sort of hang in here and see how the race develops. This turn here opened up into a paved straightaway. Right away you can tell the people were sort of jumping for position. Things started to break up here a little bit. A couple of people trying to jump out ahead, a couple of other people sort of bouncing around, deciding what to do. But I guess in the end, not much changed for me. Still 6th. A couple of guys off the front a little bit, but not too far. So this guy is wearing number 62. That means he must have started right in the back and then made up 30 spots or so in the first 4 minutes. He's flying. This guy number 2 in front of me was under 17. I think a couple of other under 17s must have gotten a big lead out in front. I think we lost sight of them pretty early. Can't believe I avoided that one. Some of these turns were still actually a little bit slippery. I actually still had the wet terrain tire on in the front because during the 7 a.m. pre-ride there was still a lot of dew on the ground, so the grass and the dirt were all wet. It was mostly dried up by the 9 o'clock start, but I guess some of the turns were still a little slippery. A little bit of a risk here, passing before this turn, and I paid for it. I guess those wet terrain tires didn't help me there. My rear camera actually snapped off on that crash, so I had to toss it off to the side, and then I never found it again after the end of the race, so I don't even have the footage of the up until the crash. So anyway, that's a pretty good way to lose a few spots. I'm down to 10th place now, and my heart rate up to 177, 176. I didn't hurt myself or anything on the crash, but I somehow just found it hard to get back up and stick with the group ahead of me. Like this guy in front of me was going to try to ride up this this incline, so I thought I'd do the same, but just couldn't make it up. Again, slowed myself down by taking a risk. I think sometimes it's easy to let your ego get in the way and think, well, I know I can ride it, so I should. But actually it's easier to just hop off the bike and run for 10 seconds and then hop back on. Easier and faster, certainly less risky. Looks like my heart rate was a little more under control here, around 170. Not great, but at least sustainable. So I managed to catch up to 29 here. I wanted to try to find a place to pass, but this section here was just too windy to really have any chance. Decided I'd probably just have to wait until we got to that paved straightaway. So coming up here, I was looking back a bit. Didn't look like he was that enthusiastic about going too fast here. A little elbow flick. So I was moving ahead anyway, and then he looks like he made an effort to stick behind me. And this under 17 guy shot out of nowhere. Like he was a little too fast for both of us. I didn't remember being in front of him, so at the time I thought maybe he lapped us at this point. But it seemed really early for that, and looking back at the lap data, I'm not sure that was the case. Number 2 here, another under 17, has been relatively close to me the whole race. So I figured that they were together, and I just lost track. Coming up here is where I fell in the first lap, so I was being a bit more cautious and took a different approach here. But I actually don't think it was any less risky. There was still a little slippery area there, and it was just slower, so I don't think there was that much benefit to it. A little disheartening to catch up to a couple of riders here and realize that they were both in a different category in the under 17 group. I figured I was probably somewhere around 10th place at this point, and a couple more spots there would have put me that much closer to the top 5. I noticed number 4 there unclick and get ready to dismount and run around the corner there, so I decided to just do the same. Even if the guy in yellow wasn't also there, probably was the safer choice to just hop off and run. Heart rate was definitely a bit higher this time around, but these 2 under 17 guys were going at a pretty good pace, so I thought if I stuck with them I might be able to catch up to the next group. There's a turn coming up here where I almost slipped out a couple of times. was fast, and then you had to turn to the right just as it's sloping downward, so it was actually hard to maintain traction. A turn like this one coming up here looks more difficult because it's steeper and a tighter turn, but because you're going so slowly, it's not really that hard to navigate. This section was a little bit of a challenge to pass. It was straight and fast and pretty narrow, so I tried to just take one opportunity when I could, but I couldn't get around this other guy. This was frustrating here. Lost a couple more seconds just on that loose dirt. Sounds like you really wanted to pass me there. That was definitely a difficult stretch to pass in, though. The turns weren't very tight, but there was really one ideal line that everyone wanted to take that was fastest through the sort of winding turns. And I wasn't about to give that up just so he could easily slip by me into 10th place. Figured I'd make him work for it a bit. I was definitely feeling the pressure a bit here. I knew I was somewhere around 10th place. You could see, obviously, the one guy right in front of me in my category, and then there were the two under 17 guys a little ahead of him, and I could just see a couple more in the ME4 category ahead of them. And then one more. Well, he's under 17, so he didn't affect my place. But my heart rate was up at 175. Pushing any harder was really going to set me back. On the other hand, I figured if I let up at all, my chances of staying in the top 10 or getting up to the top 5 or so would just slip away. So still up over 350 watts here, which is a pretty hard effort. Close to 500 there to stay on this guy's wheel. Even though it's short, it's nice to get a little bit of a draft. And then coming up here is where I fell on that first lap. I didn't really have trouble with it though in the pre-ride or other times during the race, so just decided to go back to this wider approach. I thought it was probably a little faster than that tighter approach that I took the last lap. I liked how after the barriers there, there was this long straightaway leading up to the finish line. It narrowed a bit here, and then there's this little chicane with a curve back to the main straightaway, which widens up a bit before the finish line. As I've said before, I definitely like having the option to sprint at the end to depending on how the race unfolds. Heart rate's almost up to 180 here, so I was definitely feeling it. Last lap though, so not much chance for a rest. Again, I didn't know exactly what position I was in, but I knew that I had a bit of work to do to get into probably the top 10. These banked turns coming up here were fun. They were fast. A little scary though. And this one wasn't bad. It was kind of a gentle curve coming out of it. But this next one, coming up here, quick turn to the right, and then right away, quick tight turn to the left. So if you came in with too much speed, it was definitely possible to slip out on that left-hand turn. I bet the higher category riders are a bit more confident taking those corners with speed. But it was definitely a bit nerve-wracking for me as a beginner. See, I know I almost slipped out on this one of these laps. I may have been there. Again, just not so much traction with the tight or a gradual turn off to the right while it's still sloping. Looks like I still had decent power and speed through here, despite the high heart rate. Just not enough to actually catch up to anyone. You can see on the lap tracker off to the right, my first lap was the fastest, and then progressively slower, but I think the fourth lap actually ended up being my fastest by a decent margin. So I think just the whole field of riders was picking up speed towards the end. There's still a couple of people here within range, but at this point, with only 2 minutes left, this is sort of the last straightaway before that final sprint. My heart rate where it was, it just wasn't looking that promising. But again, my speed was pretty good through here, over 31 kilometers per hour. I had plenty of, or a bit of power. I guess my only hope was that the people ahead of me were fading at this point, and that maybe I could pick up at least a couple spots. So we're coming back up to that turn where I fell for the barriers. But again, no issue here. Felt smooth enough. Handled the barriers fine, but everyone else had a pretty smooth remount, so I didn't pick up any ground there. And then it looked like everyone had a bit more left in the tank than I was really hoping for, especially this guy who just came out of nowhere to pass me. And then it just didn't have enough left. I couldn't quite crack 1,000 watts there in the final sprint, and heart rate over 180. So I was just spent. So 13th place overall, not so much different from last time. I think I was maybe 10th or 11th. I thought I had a better chance today. It was a flat, fast course without much of any climbs. But yeah, I just haven't been able to really put everything together this season. Some combination of fitness, bike handling, whatever. But I guess I've learned a lot. I've done reasonably well, just haven't been able to crack the top 5 or so. Not sure if I'll make it to another one this season or not. But anyway, it's been a fun season, and thanks everyone for the fun ride.